Have you ever scrolled through an app and found your own home listed as a rare investment opportunity? It is worse when the agent showing it is your sister's realtor, who claims you are a seller desperate for cash. While I was in a meeting, my staff asked when I was moving out. Then my property manager called with a chilling warning. He told me, "You are not just being sold, you are being erased," and they plan to close the deal this Sunday. My name is Natalie Patterson. I am the CEO of Bright Hollow Labs, a data analytics startup that has consumed every waking hour of my life for the past 5 years. Control is not just a preference for me, it is a professional necessity. I manage risk for a living. I predict outcomes based on hard numbers and behavioral patterns. I was sitting in a high-rise conference room in Denver, staring at the snow-capped peaks through the floor-to-ceiling glass, preparing to sign the biggest contract in my company's history. My entire world was structured, secured, and on an upward trajectory, or so I thought. It was 7 minutes past 9 in the morning on a Tuesday. The air in the conference room was recycled and dry. My legal team was reviewing the final clause of the merger agreement with the partners across the table. I had 5 minutes of downtime. I picked up my phone, intending to check my email for any last-minute updates from my CTO. Instead, my thumb hovered over a social media notification. It was from a real estate agent named Sloan Mercer. I had met Sloan once at a charity gala in my neighborhood, a brief interaction where she had aggressively handed me her card. I did not follow her, yet the algorithm had decided to push her latest reel to the top of my feed. I tapped the screen. The video began with that overly bright, manufactured energy typical of sales influencers. Sloan was standing in a sun-drenched living room, her arms wide open. "Welcome to your dream coastal sanctuary," she chirped. "This private showing is for serious buyers who want luxury and privacy." My breath hitched in my throat. I knew that living room. I knew the specific shade of cream on the walls, because I had spent 3 weeks selecting it. I knew the custom-made oversized sectional sofa because I had imported it from Italy. I knew the view of the Pacific Ocean through the sliding glass doors because it was the view I woke up to every single day. Sloan Mercer was standing in my house. I pressed the phone closer to my face, my hand trembling slightly. She walked through the space, touching my furniture, pointing out the architectural details I had paid for with my own blood and sweat. Then came the caption overlay that made my stomach turn over. Motivated seller. Owner relocating due to urgent work pressure. Must sell fast. I felt a cold flush spread from my neck up to my hairline. Motivated seller, I was not selling anything. I was in Denver closing a deal that would secure my financial future for the next decade. I had never spoken to Sloan Mercer about listing my property. I had never spoken to anyone about listing my property. I quickly minimized the video and opened a major real estate aggregation app. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I typed in my own address. 1842 Seabright Lane. Please let this be a mistake. I thought, please let this be some sort of algorithmic glitch. The search result loaded instantly. There it was, my home. The listing status was active. The price was set at $4,200,000. It was priced aggressively low for the area, designed to spark a bidding war. The description was a work of fiction that painted a picture of a desperate homeowner. It claimed the seller was highly motivated and looking for a quick close, with an open house scheduled for this coming Sunday. The room around me seemed to tilt. The muffled voices of the lawyers discussing liability clauses sounded like they were underwater. I was being sold. My sanctuary was being marketed to the world as a distressed asset while I was 2 states away. Then the second wave hit. My phone vibrated with a notification from Slack. It was the general channel for Bright Hollow Labs. Usually, this channel was reserved for company announcements and morale-boosting memes. Today, it was flashing with a different kind of energy. I opened the app. A message from a junior developer popped up. "Hey everyone, is it true? Are we moving headquarters?" Another message followed immediately from a sales lead. "I just saw the listing for Natalie's place. It says, urgent relocation. Does anyone know if our jobs are safe? Panic?" It was spreading through my company in real time. The rumor was too specific to be dismissed as idle gossip. To my employees, A CEO suddenly selling their primary residence at a below-market price under the banner of urgent work pressure signaled only one thing. It signaled that the company was in trouble. It signaled that I was bailing out. If the investors sitting across the table got wind of this before I signed the contract, the deal would be dead in the water. They would see me as volatile. They would think I was hiding a financial crisis. I needed to shut this down. Now, I stood up, excusing myself from the table with a tight smile that felt like it might crack my face. I walked out into the hallway, my heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. I dialed the one person who should have stopped this, Caleb Sloan. Caleb was my property manager. He was a quiet, reliable man in his late 50s who lived in the detached guest unit on the property. His job was to handle maintenance and security when I was traveling, which was often. He had been with me for 3 years. I trusted him. He answered on the second ring. "Natalie," he said. His voice was tight, strained. He sounded like a man who had been waiting for the executioner to call. "Caleb," I said, keeping my voice low but lethal. "Why is Sloan Mercer posting videos from inside my living room? Why is my house listed for $4.2 million on the open market?" There was a pause, heavy with hesitation. I tried to stop them. "Natalie," Caleb said, his voice cracking slightly, "you have to believe me." I stood in the driveway. I told them they had no right to be there. "Then why are they inside?" I demanded. "I was watching the footage." "Caleb, they are walking through my house. They had papers." "Natalie?" Caleb said. "What papers?" I asked. "Sloan had a full listing agreement," Caleb explained. The words rushing out of him. "It had your signature. It was notarized. It looked authentic. And she was not alone." "Who was with her?" I asked. My mind raced. Forgery was one thing, but a notarized forgery required a level of criminal sophistication that terrified me. "There was a woman," Caleb said, "but she let the man do the talking. There was a guy with them. He was dressed in a suit. He looked corporate. He told me he was a company representative from Bright Hollow Labs." I froze. A company representative, I was the company. I had not authorized anyone to represent me in a real estate transaction. He showed me a letter on company letterhead. Caleb continued. "It stated that due to the sensitive nature of the merger, you are negotiating in Denver. You had authorized an immediate liquidation of personal assets to shore up liquidity. He said if I interfered, I would be liable for obstructing a corporate restructuring event. He said he would call the police and have me removed from the premises for insubordination." My grip on the phone tightened until my knuckles turned white. This was not just a prank. This was not just a greedy realtor cutting corners. This was a sophisticated, multi-layered attack. Whoever did this knew I was in Denver. They knew about the merger. They knew exactly what language to use to scare a property manager into submission. They had letterhead. They had a narrative. They were inside my house. "Caleb, listen to me very carefully." I said. The anger was gone, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. "I did not sign anything. I am not selling the house. That letter is a forgery. I knew it." Caleb whispered. "I knew it felt wrong. But the paperwork. Natalie, it looked so real. And the woman. What about the woman?" I asked. "She acted like she owned the place." Caleb said, "She told Sloan to make sure the staging highlighted the ocean view. She knew the code to the garage keypad. Natalie, she opened it before I could even stop her." My blood ran cold. Only 3 people knew the code to my garage. Me, Caleb, and my sister, Heather. But Heather lived in Ohio. Heather had not visited me in 2 years. Heather did not know about the merger details, or at least, I had never told her. "Caleb," I said, "describe the woman." "Blonde," Caleb said. "About your height. She was wearing big sunglasses. But she had she had your chin." "Natalie, she told the realtor she was handling the family affairs while you were indisposed." The puzzle pieces slammed together with violent force. The realtor, the fake corporate crisis, the motivated seller narrative, and a woman who looked like me, who knew my codes, and who claimed to speak for the family. I looked back through the glass walls of the conference room. The investors were laughing at something my lawyer said. They had no idea that my life was being dismantled piece by piece. 2,000 miles away. Caleb, I said, I need you to listen to me. Do not confront them physically. If they have papers that look legal, the police might side with them until we prove otherwise. But I need you to document everything. Who is there right now? They just left about 20 minutes ago, Caleb said, but they put a lockbox on the front door. Sloan said she has private showings booked all week leading up to the open house on Sunday. Sunday, I repeated. They want to sell my house in 5 days. They are moving fast, Caleb said. The man, the corporate guy. He told me that I needed to vacate the guest unit by Friday. He said the property is being sold vacant. I felt a surge of protective rage. Caleb was innocent in this. You are not going anywhere. I said, you stay in that unit. I am going to fix this. I hung up the phone. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my mind was icy. They thought I was trapped in Denver. They thought I was too busy saving my company to notice them selling the roof over my head. They thought they could use my own life against me. I looked at the time. It was now 9:20 in the morning. I had a meeting to finish. I had a contract to sign, and then I had a war to start. I opened my laptop and sent a single text to my personal attorney. Emergency, call me, identity theft. Then I smoothed my blazer, put the smile back on my face, and walked back into the conference room. I would sign the deal. I would save my company. And then I would come home to 1842 Seabright Lane and burn their little scheme to the ground. The ink on the merger contract was barely dry when I stepped back out into the sterile hallway of the Denver high-rise. I had smiled, shook hands, and acted the part of the triumphant CEO, but my skin felt like it was vibrating against my bones. I found a quiet alcove near the emergency exit, a place where the celebratory chatter from the boardroom could not reach me, and I dialed Caleb immediately. He picked up on the first ring, which told me he was sitting by his phone, waiting. Talk to me. I said, I need every detail. Caleb, do not summarize. Walk me through exactly what happened when they pulled into the driveway. I could hear Caleb inhaling shakily on the other end of the line. The background noise of the ocean breeze was absent, meaning he was inside his guest unit with the windows shut tight. It was a convoy. Natalie, Caleb began. I thought it was a delivery at first. A black sedan pulled up, followed by a luxury SUV. I walked out to the gate like I always do. I expected a driver or maybe a landscaper, but 3 people got out. Who I asked. The Realtor? Sloan Mercer was the first one. Caleb said, she was dressed for a show, wearing a white blazer and gold jewelry. She looked right through me, but she was not the one in charge. Who was I pressed? Your sister, Caleb said quietly. Heather. Hearing her name spoken aloud by my employee sent a spike of nausea through my stomach. It was one thing to suspect it based on a glimpse of a blonde woman in a video. It was another to have it confirmed. She looked different. Natalie. Caleb continued. She was wearing a suit that looked expensive, but it did not fit her quite right, like she had borrowed it. She walked up to the gate keypad and punched in the code before I could even say a word. She looked at me and said, Good morning. Caleb, please open the main house. We are on a tight schedule. And the third person I asked, a man. Caleb said, he was tall, mid-40s, wearing a gray suit. He looked like every compliance officer or mid-level operations manager I have ever seen. Boring, forgettable. That is what made him scary. He did not introduce himself. He just stood there holding a leather portfolio. I leaned my head against the cold glass of the window, staring down at the Denver traffic. What did you tell them? I asked. I told them I had no instructions from you regarding a showing or a sale. Caleb said. I stood in front of the main door. I told them you were out of the state and that no one enters without your direct authorization. That is when the man stepped up. Caleb said. He opened that portfolio. He did not shout. He spoke very calmly. He said, Mr. Sloan, I am from the Compliance Division of the Oversight Committee handling Ms. Patterson's asset liquidation. We are aware she is in Denver closing the merger. That is why we are here, to facilitate the transition so she does not have to worry about domestic details. Asset liquidation. The phrase was so corporate, so sterile. It sounded legitimate enough to confuse anyone who did not know better. He handed me a stack of documents. Caleb said, "I have seen contracts before. Natalie, I manage your rental agreements. These looked real." There was a letter of authorization with the Bright Hollow Labs letterhead. It had your signature at the bottom. It referenced the specific date of today. It said that due to the sensitive nature of the merger, all authority regarding the property at 1842 Seabright Lane was temporarily transferred to Heather Patterson as the family proxy. I closed my eyes. They had used the merger. They knew the exact dates. They knew I would be unreachable for hours at a time. There was more. Caleb said, "There was an agency letter designating Sloan Mercer as the exclusive listing agent, and underneath that, there was a document that looked like a limited power of attorney. It was notarized. It had a seal. It stated that Heather had the legal right to make decisions regarding the physical access and staging of the home." I felt a cold fury rising. A power of attorney was not something you could just download and fake easily without risking serious jail time. This was bold. "I told them I needed to call you," Caleb said. That is when the mood changed. Heather looked at the man, and the man looked at me. He said, "Mr. Sloan, Ms. Patterson is in a closed-door meeting with investors. If you interrupt her to ask about administrative details she has already signed off on, you will be jeopardizing the deal. And if you refuse to let us in, we will be forced to contact the local authorities and report you for obstruction of a lawful owner's agent. Technically, since you are staff, blocking the owner's representative is grounds for immediate termination and trespassing charges. They threatened to arrest you in my own driveway." I said, my voice was flat. "Dangerous. They boxed me in." "Natalie," Caleb said, "they used your career as a weapon. They said if I called you, I would be the reason the merger failed. They said if I stopped them, I would be arrested." I froze. I did not know what to do, so I stepped aside. "You did the right thing," I said, though it pained me to say it. If the police had come, and they showed those papers, the police would have removed you. Then the house would be completely unprotected. "I did not just step aside," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I remembered what you told me once about liability. Always keep a record." So while they were fumbling with the lockbox, I turned on the voice memo app on my phone. I recorded the whole conversation at the door. I have the man on tape threatening me with trespassing. "Good," I said. "That is good. Caleb." And when they went inside, Caleb continued, "I did not leave. I walked around the perimeter. I took photos of the license plates on the SUV and the sedan. I took photos of the documents when the man set them down on the patio table for a second to open the sliding door. They are blurry, but you can see the headers. I also managed to swipe one of Sloan Mercer's business cards from the stack she left on the kitchen counter near the entry. "You have the documents?" I asked, my heart skipping a beat. "Digital copies," Caleb confirmed. "I sent them to your secure cloud folder 5 minutes ago." "And Natalie, I did one more thing. I went into the security server room in the guest house. I know you usually keep the interior cameras off when you are home for privacy, but since the system thinks you are away, I remotely activated the logging feature on every sensor and camera in the main house. I did not turn on the live feed because the motion might alert them if they check the panel, but the passive logs are running. Every door they opened, every light they turned on. It is all time-stamped. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Caleb was not just a property manager. He was a lifeline. "You are brilliant." "Caleb," I said, "now listen to me. This is critical. Do not let them know you are recording. Act defeated. Act like you are scared for your job. Let them think they won." "I can do that," Caleb said. "But Natalie, there is something else. Something that felt wrong even for a sale." "What?" I asked. "After they did the initial walkthrough for the video, the man and Heather went into your home office," Caleb said. "The man had a list, a physical checklist on a clipboard. They were not looking at the view. They were looking at your filing cabinets." My blood ran cold. My home office was where I kept duplicate records of my personal incorporation papers, my original IP patents, and the hard drives with the backup source code for the early versions of my company's software. "Did they take anything?" I asked. They brought empty banker's boxes in with them. Caleb said, Sloan told me it was standard decluttering for staging. She said, personal effects distract buyers. We need to depersonalize the space. But they did not pack your photos or your knickknacks. Natalie, I watched through the window from the side yard. They opened your desk drawers. They emptied the safe you keep in the lower cabinet. The safe was not for jewelry, it was for data. They walked out with 3 boxes. Caleb said, they sealed them with tape. Heather wrote storage on the side in Sharpie. But they did not put them in the garage with the other stuff. The man took those 3 boxes and put them directly into the trunk of his sedan. I gripped the phone so hard my hand cramped. This was not just about selling the house for a commission. This was a raid. They were stealing my identity, my business history, and my leverage, all under the guise of a real estate transaction. Did they change the locks, I asked? The question was vital. Not yet. Caleb said, they put a contractor lockbox on the front door with a key inside for showings. But the deadbolts are still yours. Okay, I said. I am thinking fast. Listen to me. Caleb, do not touch that lockbox. Do not try to get the boxes back from the man. If you confront them now, they will know we are onto them. We need them to feel safe. We need them to think the play is working. I understand, Caleb said. I want you to seal everything you have collected. I instructed. The audio files, the photos, the logs, upload them to an external drive and hide it. Do not leave it on your phone. If they realize you are a threat, they might try to take your device. I will hide it in the pool pump housing. Caleb said, no one looks there. Perfect. I said, now, stay in the guest unit. If they ask, you are packing your things. You are complying. Do not give them a reason to call the police to remove you. I need eyes on that house until I get there. When are you coming back? Caleb asked. Tonight, I said. I am skipping the celebratory dinner. I am getting on the next flight out of Denver. But I cannot come home yet. If I show up, they scatter. I need to catch them in the act. I need to see how far they are willing to go. I will keep watching. Caleb promised. One last thing. I said, did they say anything about Sunday yes? Caleb said. The man told Sloan that everything had to be signed, sealed, and ready for a handshake deal by Sunday afternoon. He said, we are on a countdown. The window closes on Monday. The window. They were timing this to coincide with the public announcement of my merger. They knew once the news hit the wire on Monday morning, my stock value would jump, and I would be under intense media scrutiny. They wanted to strip me clean before the world turned its eyes on me. I hung up the phone. The sterile hallway felt suffocating. I looked at the time. It was not even noon yet. My house was being staged. My secrets were being driven away in the trunk of a sedan. My sister was impersonating me. I walked toward the elevator. I had to call my lawyer. Elaine, I had to book a flight. But mostly, I had to stop shaking. They thought they were writing a script where I was the victim who quietly faded away. They had no idea they had just handed me the pen. I was not going to fade. I was going to rewrite their ending, and it was going to be brutal. I retreated to the furthest corner of the executive lounge, seeking the kind of privacy that glass walls and open-plan architecture made nearly impossible. My hands were steady, but my heart was beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I dialed Elaine Porter. Elaine was not just my lawyer. She was a shark in a silk blouse, a specialist in corporate litigation and high-stakes compliance who had saved my company from a hostile IP lawsuit 2 years ago. She answered on the first ring, her voice crisp and devoid of pleasantries. Natalie, she said, I saw the text. Tell me this is a joke. I wish it were. I replied, keeping my voice low. It is happening. Elaine, my sister and a realtor named Sloan Mercer have listed my home. They have forged documents, including a power of attorney and a corporate authorization letter. They are inside the house right now. Elaine went silent for exactly 3 seconds. I could practically hear her brain shifting gears from defense to attack. Send me what you have, she commanded. I already forwarded the files Caleb sent me. I said, you should have the photos of the documents and the audio recording in your inbox. I heard the rapid clicking of a keyboard on her end. I am looking at them now, Elaine said, her tone dropping an octave. Natalie, this is not just a family dispute. This is sophisticated fraud. The letterhead on this authorization is a near-perfect match for Bright Hollow's official template. And this power of attorney, it has a notary stamp from a county clerk in Ohio, dated 3 days ago. Were you in Ohio 3 days ago? I have not been to Ohio in 5 years. I said, then we have forgery, trespassing, and identity theft. Elaine listed off. But here's the immediate problem. If they secure a buyer who puts down a deposit in good faith, we enter a nightmare scenario called buyer reliance. If an innocent third party believes they have a valid contract because your sister is presenting herself as your proxy, unwinding that transaction becomes a civil war. We need to kill this listing before anyone signs an offer. Can we call the police? I asked. We can, Elaine said. But without you physically there to prove your identity and contradict the papers, the police might treat this as a civil matter, especially if Heather plays the concerned relative role. We need to strike at the brokerage. I am drafting a cease and desist order to Sloan Mercer's broker of record right now. I will threaten them with a lawsuit that will bury their license if they do not pull that listing within the hour. Do it, I said. I hung up, feeling a momentary sense of relief, but it was short-lived. My phone vibrated again. This time, it was an email notification. The sender was Marcus, my chief financial officer. The subject line was simply, confidential query. I opened it, and the text made the air in the room feel suddenly thin. Natalie, I know we are in a quiet period due to the merger, but I am getting flagged by our internal audit team regarding some chatter. Are you liquidating assets to cover a personal position? I saw the listing. The caption mentions urgent work pressure. I need to know if we need to disclose this to the board. I stared at the words, liquidating assets. That was not a phrase Marcus typically used. It was the exact same phrasing the man in the gray suit had used when speaking to Caleb. It was the specific terminology in the forged letter. A cold realization washed over me. This was not just Heather acting alone. She had help. Someone inside Bright Hollow Labs knew my schedule. Someone knew I would be in Denver. Someone knew the exact corporate language to use to make the lie sound convincing. I typed a reply to Marcus. My fingers stiff. Absolutely not. The listing is fraudulent. I am handling it. Do not discuss this with the board. I will explain everything when I land. I hit send, but the seed of paranoia had been planted. Was it Marcus? Was it someone in HR who had access to my travel logs and the company letterhead? I felt exposed, as if the walls of my company were made of glass, and everyone was watching me bleed. I checked the real estate app again. The listing was still up. I checked Instagram. Sloan Mercer had just posted a new story. It was a boomerang video of her pouring champagne in my kitchen. The text overlay read, "Pre-open house showings are fully booked. DM for a slot." Elaine's notice had not stopped them, or they were ignoring it. I had no choice. I opened the airline app and booked the last flight out of Denver, departing at 11:45 at night. It would get me home in the early hours of the morning. But first, I had to finish what I came here to do. I walked back into the conference room. The atmosphere had shifted. The investors were ready to sign. The papers were spread out on the mahogany table, thick stacks of legal jargon that represented 5 years of my life. Everyone sat down. The lead investor, a man named Sterling, smiled at me. Ready to make history. Natalie, he asked. I smiled back. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Absolutely, I said. As I picked up the pen, my mind was not on the valuation or the stock options. I was imagining a stranger walking through my bedroom. I was imagining Heather opening my jewelry box. I was imagining Sloan Mercer laughing in my kitchen. I felt a physical violation, a phantom touch on my skin. I signed my name, Natalie Patterson. The signature on the page was worth millions, yet the same signature had been forged to sell my life out from under me. I shook hands. I drank a sip of the celebratory scotch. I answered questions about the next quarter's projections. All the while, I was screaming on the inside. As soon as the meeting adjourned, I excused myself. citing a red-eye flight for an early morning strategy session. I declined the offer of a car service and took a taxi to the airport. I needed to be alone. In the back of the cab, the city lights blurring past the window, I pulled up Instagram one last time. Sloan had posted another story 5 minutes ago. It was a video of Heather. My sister was standing in the middle of my living room, holding a glass of wine, my wine. She looked directly into the camera, her expression a perfect mask of weary affection. My sister finally agreed to let go. Heather said, her voice soft and convincing. She is brilliant, but she is so stubborn. She tries to carry the world on her shoulders. I'm just glad I could step in and handle the heavy lifting for her. We are doing this for her own good. The video ended with Sloan chiming in. Family first. That is why we are pricing this to move. I threw the phone onto the seat next to me. The rage that filled me was not hot or explosive. It was cold. It was absolute. She was painting me as the unstable, overworked genius who needed to be saved from herself. She was using my success to justify her theft. My phone buzzed again. A text from Elaine. Brokerage claims they have a valid notarized agency agreement and refuse to take it down without a court order. They say your sister has full authority. We are going to war. I looked out the window at the runway lights as the taxi pulled up to the terminal. Let them think they have won the skirmish. I thought, they had no idea I was coming home. And they had no idea that the stubbornness Heather mocked was the only reason I had survived in this business. I grabbed my bag and stepped out into the cold Denver air. I was done being the CEO. I was done being the diplomat. When I landed, I was going to be the executioner. The red-eye flight from Denver to California was a blur of turbulence and sleepless aggression. I landed at 5:30 in the morning. The sky was a bruised purple, transitioning into the pale gray of dawn. I did not take a driver. I rented a nondescript sedan from the airport kiosk because I did not want anyone, especially Sloan Mercer or her spies, to recognize my car pulling into the driveway. I parked 2 streets away and walked the rest of the distance. The neighborhood was silent. The coastal fog was still clinging to the pavement. When I reached 1842 Seabright Lane, my heart hammered against my ribs. It looked the same from the outside. But as I walked up the driveway, I noticed the subtle changes. The garden hose was coiled differently. The welcome mat had been replaced with something generic and beige. I keyed in my code at the front door. For a terrifying second, I thought they might have changed it, but the lock clicked open. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It was not the scent of my home. It was not the subtle mix of sea salt and the sandalwood diffuser I always used. It smelled like industrial cleaner and vanilla air freshener. It smelled like a hotel lobby. I walked into the living room and stopped cold. It was my house, but it had been lobotomized. The large oil painting I had bought in Paris was gone, replaced by a generic mirror that made the room look bigger. The throw blankets I used to curl up in were missing. The bookshelves had been thinned out. My collection of vintage sci-fi novels was gone, replaced by decorative vases and fake succulents. I went to the hallway console where I kept framed photos of my graduation, my first startup team, and a picture of my father. The surface was bare. They had erased me. I walked into the master bedroom. The violation deepened. My closet doors were open. I stared at the racks. My clothes were still there, but they had been pushed to the back. In the front, a few of my most expensive coats and dresses were spaced out perfectly, like a boutique display. They were using my own wardrobe to sell the lifestyle of the motivated seller. I pulled open the dresser drawers. Empty. My underwear, my workout gear, my pajamas. Everything had been shoved into black trash bags that were piled in the corner of the room, tagged with blue painter's tape that read, "Personal storage." I felt a scream building in my throat, but I swallowed it down. I needed to see the damage in the office. I crossed the house to my study. The door was ajar. This was the room where I built Bright Hollow Labs. This was where I spent 18 hours a day coding in the early years. My desk was clear. The dual monitors were there, but my docking station was unplugged. I pulled the drawer where I kept my backup laptop, a machine that held the localized encryption keys for our server architecture. It was gone. I checked the filing cabinet. The lock had been picked or forced. The metal around the keyhole was scratched. I yanked it open. The folders labeled incorporation, stock certificates, and insurance were missing. They had not just staged the house for a sale. They had stripped it for parts. They were not just selling a building. They were harvesting my life. A soft knock on the sliding glass door made me jump. I turned to see Caleb standing there. He looked exhausted. He was wearing a hoodie and kept glancing over his shoulder. I unlocked the door and let him in. "You are here," he said. Letting out a breath, I saw the light turn on. I was worried it was them. They took the laptop. "Caleb," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "I know," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen and handed it to me. "You need to hear this. I recorded it yesterday afternoon when Heather came back to check the staging." I took the phone. I pressed play. The recording was grainy, but the voices were distinct. I heard the click of heels on the hardwood floor. "You need to be out of the guest unit by Saturday night," Heather's voice said. It was cold, authoritative. "Ms. Patterson has not given me notice," Caleb's voice replied on the recording. "My contract requires 30 days. Natalie is not in charge anymore," Heather snapped. "She is having a breakdown. Why do you think she is selling? She is insolvent. She fired you 3 days ago." "Caleb, she just did not have the guts to tell you herself because she is ashamed. I am cleaning up her mess. If you are not gone by the open house, I will have the sheriff remove you as a squatter." I stopped the playback. The silence in the room was heavy. "She told you I fired you." I whispered. "She was very convincing." Caleb said quietly, "If I did not know you, Natalie, I might have believed her. She acts like she is the one holding the family together." I handed the phone back to him. "I am so sorry. Caleb, you are not fired. You are the only person on this payroll I trust right now." I walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. I needed to understand why. I knew Heather was jealous. I knew she felt left behind. But this was nuclear. This was a level of malice I could not comprehend. I took out my phone and dialed my mother in Ohio. It was early there, but I knew she would be awake. "Hello," her voice was groggy. "Mom, it is Natalie," I said. "Oh, Natalie," she said. Her tone shifted instantly. It became guarded. "I suppose you are calling about Heather. So you know." I said, "You know she is in my house. You know she is forging my signature and selling my property." There was a pause, a long, suffocating pause. "You always have to be so dramatic." My mother said, "She is not forging anything. She told me she is helping you. She said you were overwhelmed with the merger and needed someone to handle the estate." "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I am not selling the house," Heather broke in. "She is stealing from me. She has a fake power of attorney. This is a felony." "Stop it," my mother snapped. "Just stop it. You have everything. Natalie, you have the company, the millions, the trips to Europe. Heather has nothing. Her husband left her. She is struggling. So that makes it okay for her to commit fraud," I asked. "She is your sister," my mother yelled. "Why are you always so selfish? You could have written her a check years ago. You could have set her up. But no, you had to be the big, important CEO. Now she finds a way to make a commission, to get a little piece of the pie you are hoarding, and you want to call the police a commission." I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. "She is listing the house for $4 million. She is not looking for a commission. She is looking for the whole wire transfer. She said she would share it with the family." My mother said, "She is trying to help us. You never help us. You just buy things for yourself. If you ruin this for her, Natalie, do not bother coming home for Christmas. Do not bother calling me." The line went dead. I stared at the phone. The betrayal was absolute. My mother did not care that I was the victim. She only cared that I was the bank, and the bank had finally been robbed by the Robin Hood she preferred. My phone buzzed again. A text from Heather. "I saw the flight alert. I know you are in town. Do not come to the house. Do not make a scene. I am doing this for us. Just let the sale go through, and I will disappear. You will make the money back in a month. Don't be a monster." She thought I was the monster. I was about to throw the phone across the room when Elaine called. "Natalie," Elaine said. Her voice was sharp, urgent. "We have a problem." "What now?" I asked. "I just ran a credit sweep and a title check," Elaine said. "Someone made an inquiry into the escrow process yesterday. They are not just looking for a buyer. They are looking to expedite the closing. And Natalie, they changed your mailing address." "What?" I asked. "All your mail," Elaine said. "Your bank statements, your property tax bills, your mortgage notices. A request was filed 3 days ago to forward everything to a P.O. box in Nevada. They are trying to hide the transaction notifications from you. This is not just a quick cash grab," I said, realizing the scope of it. "They want to sell the house, take the money, and disappear before I even realize the deed is gone." "Exactly," Elaine said. "I have the cease and desist ready. I can have the sheriff there in 20 minutes. We can shut this down right now." I looked around my empty, sterile living room. I looked at the spot where my father's picture used to be. I thought about my mother's voice telling me I was selfish for not letting my sister rob me. "No," I said. "Natalie," Elaine asked. "Did you hear me? We can stop them. If we stop them now," I said, "Heather will play the victim. She will say it was a misunderstanding. She will say she thought she had verbal permission. My mother will back her up. The police will call it a civil dispute, and she will walk away. She will try this again with my bank accounts or my stock." "So what do you want to do?" Elaine asked. "I want to catch them," I said. "I want them to stand in front of a buyer. I want them to hand over the keys. I want them to sign the final papers while the police are watching. I want there to be no doubt, no gray area, no misunderstanding. That is risky," Elaine warned. "If they actually get the money wired, they won't." I cut in. "We will be there. Sunday is the open house. Caleb said they want to accept an offer immediately." "You want to let the open house happen?" Elaine asked. "I want to attend it," I said. There was a silence on the line, and then I heard a grim chuckle from Elaine. "All right," she said. "If we are doing this, we need to document every single step. We need to let them dig the hole so deep they can never climb out." I hung up the phone. The morning sun was finally breaking through the fog, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the empty space where my life used to be. "Caleb," I said, turning to him. "Yes," he asked. "Go back to the guest house," I said. "Pack your bags like they asked. Put them on the porch so they see them." "You want me to leave?" he asked, looking hurt. "No," I said. "I want you to look like you are leaving, and then I want you to help me set up the cameras. Not just the security ones. I want microphones in the kitchen. I want a camera pointed at the dining table where they will sign the papers." Caleb's expression hardened. He nodded. "I will get the ladder," he said. I stood alone in the center of my living room. They wanted a motivated seller. They were about to get one. I was very motivated. Motivated to burn their entire scheme to the ground and watch them choke on the ashes. The plan Elaine proposed was surgical, cold, and terrifyingly risky. She explained that to involve the real estate commission and the local police effectively, we needed more than just a family dispute over a key. We needed irrefutable proof of fraud in progress. We needed to capture them in the act of presenting false ownership to a third party with the intent to collect funds, if we moved too early. Elaine warned me over the encrypted line. "They will pivot. They will claim they were just preparing the market while waiting for your final signature. They will claim they were acting as overzealous agents but not criminals. To bury them, Natalie, we need them to cross the line from preparation to execution. We need them to lie to a buyer's face while you are recording it." I looked at Caleb. He was standing on a stepladder in the living room, carefully unscrewing the cover of a smoke detector. "We are ready," I told Elaine. We spent the next 2 hours turning my home into a surveillance trap. Caleb was efficient and silent. He placed high-definition pinhole cameras in the crown molding of the foyer and the dining room. He taped a high-gain microphone under the marble lip of the kitchen island. Every device was hardwired into the guest house's independent network, bypassing the main router in case Dylan or someone else was monitoring the traffic. I sat in the corner of the guest unit, watching the feeds populate on my laptop screen. The image was crisp. I could see the staged furniture, the empty shelves, and the fraudulent peace of the house. It felt like watching a stage set for a play where I was the main character. But I had not been given the script. We need audio confirmation. I instructed Caleb as he adjusted the angle of the living room camera. I need to hear Sloan or Heather say the words, owner authorized or signed contract. I need them to explicitly state that I am not involved. I put a backup recorder in the ventilation duct behind the sofa. Caleb said, wiping dust from his hands, if they sit there to negotiate, we will hear them breathing. We finished just before noon. The house was silent again, waiting for its actors, but the silence was broken by a notification from Elaine. She had sent a new file, marked Urgent Analysis. I opened it. It was a forensic overlay of the signature on the power of attorney document compared to the signature on my most recent corporate filings. Natalie, look at the vector points, Elaine said when I called her back. I see them. I said, they are identical. They are not just similar. Elaine said, they are mathematically perfect. No human signs their name exactly the same way twice. There are always microscopic variations in pressure and angle. This signature on the real estate document is a digital clone of the signature you used on the Bright Hollow quarterly report 3 months ago. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. They did not just practice my handwriting. I realized they lifted it. Exactly, Elaine said. This confirms that the source isn't just your sister getting lucky with a pen. Someone with high-level access to your company's internal document server extracted that signature file and gave it to her. I hung up and immediately opened a secure tunnel to the Bright Hollow Labs server. I was not just a CEO. I was a data architect. I knew every corner of my system. If someone had exported a high-resolution image of my verified signature, they would have left a digital footprint. I bypassed the standard admin dashboard and went straight into the raw server logs. I filtered for access requests to the legal compliance sensitive directory. This folder was restricted to myself, the chief legal officer, and the head of HR. I saw nothing for weeks. Then, I widened the search parameters to include the IT maintenance override codes. There it was, at 2:14 in the morning last Tuesday, the night before the listing went live. A user had accessed the directory using a system admin root privilege. They had copied 3 files: my driver's license scan, my passport scan, and the high-resolution transparency of my official signature. The user ID was Drorkit Dylan Rourke. I stared at the name, feeling a mixture of nausea and validation. Dylan was a senior systems administrator. He had been with the company for 4 years. He was quiet, competent, and always willing to work late. I had bought him coffee. I had approved his bonus last Christmas. I pulled up his personnel file. I scrolled down to the emergency contacts and background reference section. There, listed as a personal reference from his time in Ohio, was Heather Patterson. I sat back in my chair, the pieces locking together with a satisfying, sickening click. They had grown up together. I vaguely remembered a lanky boy hanging around our house when I was in college. Someone Heather used to boss around. I had not made the connection because, to me, he was just Dylan from IT. To Heather, he was a sleeper agent inside my empire. He gave her the keys to my identity. I whispered to the empty room. I reached for my phone to call security and have Dylan escorted out of the building immediately. My finger hovered over the dial button. No, if I fired Dylan now, he would text Heather. The warning would go out. The gray suit man would vanish. Sloan would claim clerical error. They would retreat into the shadows, and I would be left with a staged house and no criminal conviction. I needed Dylan to feel safe. I needed him to think the plan was proceeding perfectly. I opened the server command line and set up a mirrored watchdog program. I would not block his access, but I would record every keystroke he made from this moment forward. I wanted to see what else he was planning to steal. Caleb came back into the guest unit, looking pale. "Natalie," he said. "What is it?" I asked, not looking up from the code I was writing. "I just got a text from Sloan," he said. I turned around. Caleb held up his phone. The screen showed a message from the Realtor. "Caleb, please ensure the driveway is clear by 7 this evening. We have a private showing for a VIP cash buyer. They are flying in specifically for this. Do not engage with them. Saturday night." I said, "That is before the open house. Read the second part." Caleb said, "I took the phone. Under the instruction to clear the driveway, there was an attachment. It was a PDF titled, Escrow Wire Instructions Template. Please print 2 copies of this and leave them on the kitchen island." The text read, "The buyer wants to verify the routing numbers for an immediate deposit if they like the property." My hands went cold. Wire instructions were the endgame. Once a buyer sent a wire transfer, that money was gone. It was instant, irreversible, and untraceable if it went to an offshore account or a shell company. "They are not waiting for Sunday." I said, "The open house is a distraction. They plan to close the deal tonight." Caleb looked at me, his eyes wide. "If they get a buyer to wire the money tonight," Caleb said, "the money could be in their account by Monday morning. By the time you announce your merger, they will be gone." I stood up. The fatigue from the flight and the stress vanished, replaced by adrenaline. "This is it," I said. "This is the moment Elaine was talking about. If they hand those wire instructions to a buyer, that is wire fraud. That is grand larceny. That is prison." I looked at the monitors showing the silent, empty rooms of my house. "Print the forms, Caleb," I ordered. What he asked, "Do exactly what she said." I commanded, "Print the wire instructions, leave them on the island, make it look perfect. Make them feel like they have won. But the buyer." Caleb started, "We will be there," I said. "We are going to watch them walk into the trap. We are going to record them handing over the fraudulent bank details. And then, we are going to introduce ourselves." I looked at the clock. It was 1 p.m. We had 6 hours until the curtain went up. "Go to the store," I told Caleb. "Buy some groceries. I want you to make dinner in the guest house tonight. I want the smell of food to drift over there. Make it seem normal." "And you?" Caleb asked. "I'm going to get dressed." I said, "I have a showing to attend." I sat back down at the computer and watched the cursor blink on Dylan Rourke's profile. I decided to send one email before the night began. I composed a message to my head of security. Set to a delay timer, it would send at exactly 8 o'clock tonight. Subject immediate suspension of access. Dylan Rourke. Body isolate his workstation. Revoke all credentials. Detain if still on premises. Police report to follow. I hit the schedule button. The stage was set. The cameras were rolling. The villains were on their way. And for the first time in days, I smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator watching prey walk into a cage. Let them come. I thought, I am ready to close the deal. Sunday arrived with a sky so blue and perfect it felt like a personal insult. From the darkened window of the guest unit, I watched the street fill up with cars. It was a parade of luxury sedans and family SUVs, all carrying people who thought they were about to score the deal of the century. At exactly 1 p.m, Sloan Mercer marched down the driveway and planted a white sandwich board in the center of my lawn. Open house, motivated seller, price reduced. The balloons tied to the sign bobbed cheerfully in the breeze. To the outside world, this was a standard real estate event. To me, it was a crime scene in progress. I sat in front of the bank of monitors Caleb and I had set up. Caleb was pacing behind me, his arms crossed over his chest. We had not slept much. The air in the small room was heavy with the smell of stale coffee and nervous sweat. "They are early," Caleb said, pointing to the screen showing the front door. I looked. Heather was standing on the porch. She was wearing a beige dress that I recognized. It was mine. She had taken it from the back of my closet, a dress I had worn to a board meeting 3 years ago. She looked the part, the tired, overwhelmed sister managing a crisis. Sloan stood beside her, checking her phone. The audio feed cracked to life as the first couple walked up the path. "Welcome," Sloan said, her voice dripping with practiced warmth. "Please come in. This is Heather, the owner's sister and representative. Thank you for coming," Heather said. She reached out and shook the woman's hand. Her voice was soft, carrying a tremor of performative sadness. "My sister is heartbroken to leave, but the relocation to Singapore happened so fast, she has to be on a plane by Tuesday." "Singapore," I whispered to the screen. That was a new detail. It was clever. It explained why I was not there, why the house was being sold furnished, and why there was such a rush. It painted a picture of a chaotic, sudden departure that justified the low price. We are just trying to get everything settled for her so she can focus on her new role. Heather continued, We are looking for a quick, clean escrow. The couple nodded sympathetically. They walked inside, looking around at the ocean view with greedy eyes. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Elaine. I am in position down the street. The investigator is in the unmarked van 2 houses down. We are recording the license plates of everyone who enters. Hold the line. Natalie. I did not reply. I was too focused on the screen. More people arrived. Within 20 minutes, my living room was full of strangers. They were opening my cabinets. They were touching my countertops. I watched a man tap on the walls of my dining room, testing for studs, as if he already owned the place. It was a violation so profound it made my skin crawl. Then, the dynamic changed. A black sedan pulled up to the curb, double parking behind a potential buyer's SUV. A man stepped out. He was not a buyer. He was not a neighbor. He was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting polyester suit and carrying a thick leather briefcase. He walked with a purpose that set him apart from the casual browsers. Who is that? Caleb asked, leaning in. I do not know. I said, Zoom in on camera 2. I adjusted the feed. The man walked right past Sloane's assistant at the door without signing the guest registry. He went straight to Sloane. They exchanged a nod that spoke of familiarity. Sloane whispered something to him, and he moved to the kitchen island, setting his briefcase down on the marble surface. He opened the case and pulled out a stack of folders. They were color-coded. I turned up the volume on the kitchen microphone. Here are the escrow packets, the man said. His voice was raspy. I have the preliminary title report and the wire instructions pre-printed. If anyone makes a verbal offer, get them to sign the intent form immediately. We need to lock the deposit today. Sloane nodded. Thanks, Barry. Just stand by the patio door. If I give you the signal, you swoop in with the paperwork. Barry. I typed the name into my notes. He was not a standard escrow officer. Legitimate title companies did not send runners to open houses to strong-arm buyers into signing intent forms on a Sunday. He was a transaction coordinator, likely hired to push the paperwork through a shell company before anyone noticed the irregularities. The room was buzzing now. Sloane was working the crowd like a conductor. We have multiple parties interested, I heard her say to a young couple standing near the fireplace. The seller is going to review all offers at 6 this evening. But honestly, she is going to prioritize cash and speed. If you can show proof of funds and close in 7 days, the house is yours. 7 days, the husband said. That is incredibly fast. It is the nature of the relocation. Sloane lied smoothly. She needs the liquidity to set up her life overseas. It was working. I could see the panic setting in on the faces of the buyers. They were afraid of losing out. Sloane was manufacturing a frenzy. Wait, Caleb said suddenly. Where is Heather? I scanned the monitors. She was not by the door. She was not in the kitchen. Check the garage feed, I said. I clicked on the camera we had hidden in the garage rafters. The garage was not part of the open house tour. We had locked the door from the house, or so I thought. The screen flickered, and there she was. Heather had used the keypad code to enter from the side yard. The garage was filled with the boxes of personal items I had stored there months ago, old tax returns, college yearbooks, and boxes of hardware from the early days of Bright Hollow Labs. She was not looking for family albums. She was moving with frantic intensity. She was ripping the tape off boxes, glancing inside, and tossing them aside if they did not contain what she wanted. She shoved a box of my winter clothes to the floor. She kicked aside a crate of books. What is she doing? I asked. The buyers are inside. She should be playing the hostess. She is looking for something specific, Caleb said. Look at her hands. She is holding a piece of paper. She is checking the labels on the boxes against a list. I zoomed in. Heather was holding a crumpled note. She paused in front of a heavy plastic bin marked BHL, Legacy IP, 2019. BHL, Bright Hollow Labs. That bin contained the physical prototypes of my company's original data processors and the hard copy non-disclosure agreements from my co-founders. It was useless to a thief, but invaluable to a competitor or someone trying to challenge my ownership of the company. Heather pulled the lid off. She started digging through the files. She pulled out a thick binder. She opened it, checked the first page, and a look of triumph crossed her face. She tucked the binder under her arm and covered it with her shawl. Caleb turned to me, his face pale in the glow of the monitors. "Natalie," he whispered, "this is not about the commission. $4 million is a lot of money, but it is a one-time payout. That binder is in it." "The original partnership agreements," I said, my voice cold, "and the assignment of intellectual property rights. If those documents disappear, or if they fall into the wrong hands, someone could claim that the technology Bright Hollow is built on does not belong to the company. They could hold the entire merger hostage. They are not just trying to sell the house," Caleb said. "They are trying to decapitate you. They want to sell the house to get the cash and steal the documents to destroy your leverage." I felt a surge of adrenaline that was almost painful. The betrayal had layers I had not even imagined. Heather was not just a jealous sister. She was an industrial spy, and Dylan Rourke had likely told her exactly where to look. Sloane's voice cut through the audio feed again. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced to the living room, "we have just received a very strong verbal offer. If you are serious, I need you to speak with our coordinator. Barry, right now." The crowd surged toward the kitchen. Barry opened his folders. "It is time," I said. I stood up and smoothed my blazer. I checked the small camera pinned to my lapel to make sure it was recording. Caleb stood up with me. "Are we going in?" he asked. "We are going in," I said. "Text Elaine. Tell her the transaction coordinator is attempting to collect deposits. Tell her we have a confirmed theft of corporate property in the garage. Tell the investigator to block the driveway." I walked to the door of the guest unit. I could hear the murmur of the crowd from the main house. They were about to sign away their savings for a lie. Heather was clutching a binder that could ruin my life. "I am not just the owner anymore," I said, opening the door into the bright, blinding sunlight. "I am the witness." We walked across the lawn. The gravel crunched under my boots. A few people standing on the porch looked at me, confused by my intense expression, and the way Caleb marched beside me like a bodyguard. I reached the front door. I did not punch in the code. I did not ring the bell. I grabbed the handle and threw it open. The air conditioning hit my face. The smell of expensive perfume and treachery filled my nose. Sloane looked up from the kitchen island, a pen poised over a contract. Her smile faltered. Heather froze near the hallway door, the binder pressed against her chest. I stepped inside, my heels clicking loudly on the hardwood floor. "I hope I'm not interrupting," I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the room, "but I believe you are selling my house." The silence that followed my announcement was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, and instantly charged with confusion. 30 heads turned in my direction. The low hum of conversation regarding square footage and school districts evaporated, replaced by the sharp, uncomfortable sound of people realizing they had walked into a trap. I stood in the entryway, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I did not look like a crazy person. I did not look like a distraught sister. I was wearing my travel blazer, my posture was rigid, and my expression was one of polite, lethal curiosity. Caleb stood slightly behind me, his phone raised, the red recording light blinking steadily. A woman standing near the fireplace broke the silence. She was holding a flyer with my house on it. She looked from me to Heather, then back to me. "Excuse me," she said, her voice pitching up with uncertainty. "Who are you?" We were told the owner was in Singapore. I walked further into the room, ignoring the instinct to scream at the strangers touching my furniture. I stopped 3 feet away from Sloane Mercer. Sloane was pale. The professional mask she wore was cracking around the edges, her eyes darting between me and the open front door where Elaine was waiting for her cue. "I am Natalie Patterson," I said, my voice projecting clearly without shouting. "I am the sole owner of this property. I am not in Singapore. I have not authorized a sale, and I am certainly not relocating." Sloane recovered first. She was a salesperson. After all, Survival was her primary instinct. She forced a tight, condescending smile and stepped around the kitchen island to block me from the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, please," Sloane said, raising her hands. "This is exactly why we are handling this transaction with such discretion. As we mentioned, the seller is under significant stress. Family dynamics can be complicated during a liquidation." She turned to me, dropping her voice to a hiss that she hoped the room would not hear. "You need to leave, Natalie. You signed the power of attorney. You are disrupting a lawful open house. If you do not step outside, I will have security remove you." I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that made the couple near the window step back. "Show me," I said. Sloane blinked. "Excuse me. Show me the paper," I repeated, loud enough for the man named Barry to freeze halfway through reaching for his briefcase. "You claim to have a power of attorney that allows you to sell my home while I am standing right here. Show it to me. Show these people the document you are asking them to bet $4 million on." Sloane hesitated. She looked at Heather. Heather was still clutching the binder against her chest, her knuckles white. My sister looked like a deer caught in headlights, unable to decide whether to run or attack. "Give it to her," Heather said, her voice trembling. "Just show her. Sloane, it is legal. She knows she signed it." Sloane reached into her folder and pulled out the document Caleb had photographed earlier. She held it up, but she did not hand it over. She displayed it like a shield. "Here," Sloane declared. "A notarized limited power of attorney, signed by Natalie Patterson on the 24th of this month, granting Heather Patterson full authority to liquidate assets." The crowd leaned in. Phones started to rise. I saw the red circles of recording indicators popping up on screens all around the room. This was the court of public opinion, and session was in order. I took a step closer, peering at the document without touching it. "That is fascinating," I said. I pointed to the bottom of the page. "You have a notary stamp there from a clerk in Franklin County, Ohio. It is dated the 24th. "That is correct," Sloane said, looking smug. "It is a valid stamp. It is a valid stamp." I agreed, but it is physically impossible. On the 24th, I was in a deposition in downtown Denver from 8 in the morning until 6 at night. I have 15 lawyers and a court stenographer who can testify to my location. Unless I can teleport to Ohio and back during a lunch break, that signature was forged. A murmur rippled through the room. "Furthermore," I continued, relentless, "look at the printed name under the signature. It says Natalie Marie Patterson." So Sloane challenged. "My middle name is Ann," I said. "My driver's license, which you clearly did not check, says Natalie Ann Patterson. The deed to this house says Natalie Ann Patterson. The person who forged this document used the middle name from my mother's side of the family, which is what my sister calls me when she is angry. But it is not my legal name." I looked directly at Heather. "You got sloppy. Heather, you were so focused on the signature that you forgot who I actually am on paper." The room erupted. The couple who had been ready to make an offer dropped the pen on the counter. The man in the gray suit, Barry, snapped his briefcase shut. The air in the room shifted from confusion to hostility. These people realized they had almost been scammed. Heather lunged forward. She grabbed my arm, her grip painful. She tried to drag me toward the hallway, away from the prying eyes of the buyers. "Stop it," she hissed, her face inches from mine. "Stop it right now. You are making a scene. Come to the back. We can talk about this. Do not embarrass me in front of these people." I yanked my arm away. I did not retreat. I did not lower my voice. "I am not the one who should be embarrassed," I said, staring her down. "You broke into my home. You staged it with my clothes. You are trying to sell my life to strangers. You embarrassed yourself when you decided to steal my identity and call it family business." "I am trying to save us," Heather shouted, losing her composure. "You have so much money you do not even know what to do with it. You would not even notice if this house was gone." That was the admission. The room heard it. At that moment, the front door opened wide. Elaine stepped in. She was not alone. Behind her stood a private investigator, a large man with a calm demeanor, holding a camera that was clearly professional grade. Elaine wore a charcoal suit that cost more than the commission Sloane was hoping to make. She walked into the center of the room and raised a hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced. Her voice was a gavel strike. "I am Elaine Porter, legal counsel for Ms. Patterson. This property is not for sale. The listing is fraudulent. The documents presented to you are forgeries. I strongly advise everyone to vacate the premises immediately to avoid being named as witnesses in a criminal fraud investigation." The effect was instantaneous. The casual lookers bolted for the door. The serious buyers looked angry. They started shouting questions at Sloan. "You said the title was clear," one man yelled. "You checked the funds," another woman shouted. Sloan was backing away, retreating toward the kitchen island. "It is a misunderstanding," Sloan cried out, her voice cracking. "This is a domestic dispute. We were told the seller was incapacitated. We have a contract, Barry." The transaction coordinator was trying to edge his way toward the sliding glass door. He looked like a rat looking for a sewer grate. "Wait a minute." A man's voice cut through the chaos. It was the husband of the couple who had been ready to wire the money. He stepped in front of Barry, blocking his path. He looked at Heather, then at Barry. "If this is just a family issue," he asked, his voice dripping with suspicion, "if this is just two sisters arguing over who gets to sell a house, why is there a transaction coordinator here with pre-printed wire instructions for a shell account?" He pointed at the folder Barry was clutching. "I work in finance," the man said. "Family disputes do not come with escrow officers who work on Sundays. This is a scam." Heather looked around wildly. She saw the guests filming. She saw Caleb recording. She saw Elaine standing like a sentinel by the door. She realized the narrative had slipped out of her control. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears that I knew were fake. "Natalie, please," she sobbed. "Tell them. Tell them I was just trying to help. Tell them we talked about this." She was giving me an out. She was begging me to lie to save her. If I nodded, if I said yes, the police would go away. The fraud would become a mistake. She would walk free. I looked at the binder in her hand, the binder that contained the secrets of my company, the binder she was going to steal to destroy me after she sold my house. I looked at Sloan, who was texting frantically, probably trying to delete evidence. I looked at the investigator standing next to Elaine. He gave me a subtle nod. He was waiting for one thing. He needed them to confirm they had the authority one last time, in the face of my denial, to prove that this was not an accident, but a calculated attempt to deceive. Elaine stepped forward. "Ms. Mercer, Ms. Patterson," Elaine said, "I am asking you one final time for the record. Do you claim to have the legal authority to collect deposit funds for this property today?" The room went silent. Even the angry buyers waited. Sloan looked at Barry. Barry looked at the floor. Heather looked at me. If they said no, it was over. If they said yes, it was a crime. Heather straightened her back. She made her choice. She decided that if she bluffed hard enough, reality would bend to her will. "Yes," Heather said, her voice shaking but defiant. "I have the authority. My sister is unstable. The papers are real. We are accepting deposits." I let out a breath. She had just signed her own warrant. "Thank you," I said softly. I turned to the investigator. "I believe you have heard enough." The declaration hung in the air like smoke. Heather had looked into the eyes of a licensed investigator and claimed, on the record, that she had the authority to sell my home. She had doubled down on the lie, gambling that her performance of the aggrieved sister would outweigh the cold, hard facts of my presence. But she had forgotten about Caleb. My property manager stepped out from behind my shoulder. He did not look like the intimidated employee Heather had bullied earlier in the week. He held his phone up high, connected via Bluetooth to the high-fidelity speaker system we had hidden in the ventilation duct earlier that morning. "I think there is one more thing the room needs to hear," Caleb said. His voice was steady, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. He pressed a button on his screen. The audio that blasted through the living room was crystal clear. It was not the polite, tearful voice Heather was using now. It was the voice of a woman drunk on power and contempt. "You are done here. Caleb." The recording played. "Natalie signed everything. She is cashing out. She does not care about this house or you. She told me to change the locks and toss your stuff on the curb if you were not gone by Sunday. Do not test me. I am the owner now." The silence that followed was absolute. Heather flinched as if she had been slapped. She looked at the speaker vent, then at Caleb, her face draining of all color. The tearful victim mask slipped, revealing the terrified, caught thief beneath. Sloane Mercer dropped the folder she was holding. The papers scattered across the hardwood floor, the fake title report, the glossy brochures, the lies she had printed on heavy cardstock. "That is not," Heather stammered, pointing a shaking finger at Caleb. "That is edited. He is making that up." "It is time-stamped," Caleb said, his voice cold. "Recorded yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and I have the security log showing you entering the premises 5 minutes prior." The mood in the room shifted from confusion to open hostility. The guests, who minutes ago had been potential buyers, were now realizing how close they had come to losing hundreds of thousands of dollars in deposit money. "This is a crime scene," a man in a navy blazer said. He pulled out his phone. "I am calling the police. I am not getting dragged into a wire fraud investigation because I signed a guest registry." "No, please," Sloane shrieked. She rushed toward the man, her hands fluttering wildly. "There is no need for authorities. This is clearly a misunderstanding between siblings. We can resolve this." A misunderstanding, a woman near the kitchen laughed bitterly. She held up her phone. "I just live-streamed your client claiming she had a power of attorney that the actual owner says is a forgery. And now we have audio of her threatening to illegally evict a tenant. This is not a misunderstanding. Lady, this is a felony." The room became a sea of flashing screens. People were not leaving yet. They were documenting. The video of Heather claiming to be the representative, followed by my entrance, was likely already circulating on local neighborhood watch groups. The reputation of the open house had gone from exclusive to infamous in under 60 seconds. I stood still, watching the dominoes fall. I did not need to scream. I did not need to fight. The truth, once released, was doing all the violent work for me. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a rhythmic, urgent buzzing that I associated with only one thing: a level 1 corporate crisis. I pulled it out, tearing my eyes away from the wreckage of my living room for a second. It was a notification from the head of human resources at Bright Hollow Labs. "Urgent board alert." The subject line read. My stomach tightened. I opened the email. "Natalie, we just received an anonymous tip sent to the entire board of directors. The sender claims to have proof that you are liquidating personal assets to cover an undisclosed solvency issue before the merger." They attached a photo of the open house listing and a scan of a wire transfer request. "The board is asking for an immediate emergency call. They are spooked." I felt the blood pound in my ears. This was the second pincer of the attack. They knew the open house might get messy, so they had a failsafe. They wanted to trigger a vote of no confidence. If the board thought I was secretly bankrupt and selling my home to flee, they would pause the merger. They would freeze my access. I checked the timestamp on the anonymous email. It was sent 4 minutes ago. I quickly toggled to the server monitoring app I had installed to watch Dylan Rourke. There it was, a login event. Dylan had accessed the external mail relay server exactly 5 minutes ago. He had not just watched the open house fail. He had executed the backup plan. He was trying to burn the company down to cover Heather's retreat. I looked at Heather. She was backed against the wall near the hallway, looking small and cornered. She did not know about the email. She was just the pawn in the living room. The real damage was being done by the people pulling the strings in the dark. I forwarded the log to Elaine, who was standing by the front door blocking the exit. "It is a coordinated attack," I texted her. "Dylan just emailed the board. Don't let them leave." Elaine nodded imperceptibly. She signaled to the investigator. "Excuse me." The investigator boomed, stepping into the center of the room. His voice was authoritative, stopping the guests who were trying to push past. "Local law enforcement has been notified and is en route. I need everyone to remain calm. Ms. Mercer, Ms. Patterson, please step out onto the patio. We need to secure the scene." Sloane turned on Heather with the ferocity of a cornered animal. You told me you had the authority, Sloane screamed, abandoning all pretense of professionalism. You told me she was in a mental health facility in Singapore. You showed me the emails. I thought, Heather stammered. You lied to me, Sloane shouted, playing to the cameras of the guests. I am a licensed professional. I acted in good faith based on your documentation. If this is fraud, I am a victim too. I watched Sloane try to rewrite history. It was pathetic. She had ignored the red flags because she wanted the commission. She had bypassed standard due diligence because she smelled a quick sale. And now, she was trying to throw my sister into the fire to save her own license. In the chaos of Sloane's screaming and the guests demanding answers, I noticed movement in the kitchen. Barry, the man in the cheap suit with the escrow folders, was moving. He was not arguing. He was not filming. He was sliding along the edge of the cabinetry, heading toward the sliding glass door that led to the side yard. He had closed his briefcase. He looked like a man who knew exactly how to vanish when a deal went south. Caleb, I said, keeping my voice low. The coordinator. Caleb looked. Barry was already out the door. He is running, Caleb said. Let him go. I said, but get the car. Caleb nodded and slipped out the back door of the kitchen, moving faster than I had ever seen him move. I stayed in the room. I needed to be the anchor. I needed the board to see me standing here, defending my property, not running away. I raised my phone and took a photo of the scene: Heather cowering, Sloane screaming, the investigator holding the line. I attached it to a reply to the board. The report is false, I typed. I am currently disrupting a criminal fraud attempt involving identity theft against me. The listing is fake. The police are on scene. I am not insolvent. I am the victim of a crime, and I am pressing charges. Full report to follow within the hour. I hit send. It was a gamble, but the truth was my only weapon left. Outside, the sound of sirens began to wail, getting louder as they approached up the hill. The blue and red lights flashed against the living room windows, washing over the staged furniture and the terrified faces of the conspirators. Heather looked at me across the room. Her eyes were wide, pleading. She mouthed the word sister. I looked at her. Then I looked at the binder. She was still clutching the binder that contained the intellectual property of my life's work. She was not my sister in that moment. She was a thief who had tried to bury me. I walked over to her. She flinched as I approached. I reached out and firmly pulled the binder from her grip. She did not fight me. Her hands were limp. This does not belong to you, I said quietly. The police officers entered the house, their radios crackling. Elaine stepped forward to brief them, handing over her business card and the file of evidence we had prepared. I walked to the window. I saw Barry running down the side street, away from the parked cars. He was heading toward a nondescript gray sedan parked 2 blocks away. My phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. Got him. He is in a rental. Florida plates. I have the number and a clear shot of his face. I watched the gray sedan peel away from the curb, disappearing around the corner just as a second police cruiser arrived. Caleb walked back into the yard a moment later, breathing hard. He came up to the sliding door where I was standing. He is gone, Caleb said. But I got the plate. Good, I said. Natalie, Caleb said, his expression grim. I saw the way he moved. I saw how he checked his mirrors. And I saw the logos on the paperwork in his back seat when he threw the briefcase in. What about them, I asked. It was not a title company, Caleb said. It was a processing outfit. I used to see guys like that when I worked property management in Miami. They are fixers. They set up shell escrows to move dirty money fast. He looked at me, his eyes serious. Your sister did not organize this, Caleb said. She is not smart enough to hire a guy like Barry. Sloane is just greedy, but Barry is a pro. I looked back at Heather, who was now being questioned by a police officer, tears streaming down her face as she pointed accusingly at Sloane. Caleb was right. Heather was messy, emotional, desperate. This operation, the forged signatures, the server access, the fake escrow officer was precise. This is a ring, Caleb said. A real estate fraud ring. They found a weak link in your family, and they used her to get to you. I tightened my grip on the binder. Then we are not just suing my sister, I said. We are taking down the whole network. I turned back to the room. The police were asking Heather to step outside. Sloan was trying to call her lawyer. The open house was over. The investigation had just begun, and I had the license plate that would lead us to the head of the snake. The fallout from the open house was immediate, but the silence that followed was deceptive. Monday morning at Bright Hollow Labs did not feel like a victory lap. It felt like a crime scene investigation. I sat in the secure conference room with my chief security officer and the external forensic audit team we had hired overnight. The large monitors on the wall displayed the digital autopsy of Dylan Rourke's activity. The logs were damning. They showed a clear, linear path of betrayal. At 2 a.m. on Tuesday, Dylan had used his administrative privileges to bypass the encryption on the Human Resources server. He had located the file labeled Executive ID Patterson. He had extracted the high-resolution scan of my driver's license, my passport, and the digital vector file of my official signature. He had then compressed these files into an encrypted zip folder and emailed them to an external address H. Patterson Private. He did not stop there. The logs showed that immediately after sending the files, he ran a scrubbing program designed to overwrite his footprints. It was a sophisticated tool, one that would have fooled a standard audit. But he had forgotten that I wrote the original kernel for our security architecture. I had a shadow log running at the kernel level that recorded everything, including the attempt to delete the record. Bring him in. I said to the head of security. Dylan walked in 10 minutes later. He did not look like a man who had been caught. He looked indignant. He sat down at the table, crossed his arms, and looked me in the eye. This is harassment. Natalie, Dylan said, I am a senior administrator. You cannot suspend my access without cause. I slid the printed log across the table. I have cause. I said, I have the timestamps. I have the file names. I have the destination email address. You stole my identity. Dylan, you gave my sister the tools she needed to commit felony fraud. Dylan barely glanced at the paper. He shrugged. I was helping a family member with a lawful request, he said, his voice smooth and practiced. Heather provided me with a power of attorney. She told me you lost your wallet in Denver and needed digital copies of your ID to fly home. She said the signature file was for a time-sensitive release form you needed to sign remotely. I was acting under the authority of your appointed proxy. I stared at him. The lie was so thin it was insulting. You work in data security. Dylan, I said, you know that a power of attorney does not grant you permission to bypass company firewalls at 2 a.m, and you know that sending proprietary digital signatures to a personal Gmail account is an immediate firing offense, regardless of who asks for it. I did not know it was for real estate, Dylan countered. I thought I was helping the CEO out of a jam. If Heather misused the files, that is on her. I'm a victim here too. He was sticking to the script. It was the same script Sloan was using. Client lied. I acted in good faith. It was a coordinated defense designed to create reasonable doubt. Get out, I said. You are suspended pending the completion of the criminal investigation. If you leave the state, we will have a warrant issued for your arrest. Dylan stood up. He smoothed his shirt, looking more annoyed than afraid. You are making a mistake. Natalie, he said, you are going to ruin this company's reputation over a family squabble. Security escorted him out. I watched him go, feeling a cold knot in my stomach. He was too calm. He knew something I did not. I went back to my office where Elaine was organizing the chaos into legal piles. She had 3 distinct stacks of paper on my desk. This is the civil suit against Sloan and her brokerage, Elaine said, tapping the first stack. We are suing for damages related to the staging, the unauthorized entry, and the emotional distress. We are also filing a complaint with the state licensing board to have her license revoked immediately. And the second stack I asked, criminal referrals, Elaine said, fraud, forgery, identity theft. Trespassing. We are submitting this packet to the district attorney this afternoon. The police report from yesterday provides the foundation, but the digital evidence from Dylan ties it all together. It proves premeditation. And the third I asked, pointing to a thin red folder, that is the problem. Elaine said, that is the family fallout. As if on cue. My personal cell phone began to ring. It was my mother. Again. She had called 12 times since the police left my house on Sunday. I had not answered once. "Answer it," Elaine said gently. "You need to hear what their narrative is. We need to know what they are telling people." I picked up the phone and put it on speaker. "Natalie," my mother's voice burst through the line, shrill and hysterical. "Finally. Do you have any idea what you have done? Heather is at the police station. They are fingerprinting her like a common criminal. She committed a crime. Mom," I said, keeping my voice flat. "She forged my signature. She tried to sell my house. She was trying to help." My mother screamed. "She made a mistake with the paperwork. Fine. But you did not have to call the police. You could have stopped it. You could have just told the people to leave. Why do you always have to destroy everything I destroyed? Nothing." I said, "I saved my home." "You have insurance," my mother yelled. "If the money had gone missing, the bank would have replaced it. But you cannot replace a sister. She is family. Natalie, she has children. If she goes to jail, who is going to take care of them? You are so selfish. You have your millions and your fancy company, and you cannot even spare a little compassion for your own flesh and blood. Drop the charges. Natalie, tell them it was a misunderstanding." I listened to her voice, the voice that had guided me through childhood, now twisted into a weapon to protect the person attacking me. "I cannot do that. Mom," I said, "it is out of my hands." "The district attorney is picking up the case. You can fix this," she insisted. "You always fix things. If you do not drop these charges, Natalie, do not ever speak to me again. You will be dead to this family." I hung up. The silence in the office was heavy. Elaine looked at me with sympathy, but she remained professional. "They are trying to break you emotionally so you will fold legally." Elaine said, "Do not let them." I nodded, pushing the pain down into a deep, dark box. I turned my attention to the physical evidence. On the corner of my desk sat the binder I had wrestled from Heather's hands. I had assumed, in the heat of the moment, that she was stealing it to hold it for ransom. I thought she wanted to threaten to burn my original work if I did not give her the commission money. I opened the binder. It contained the founding documents of Bright Hollow Labs. I flipped through the pages. It was dry. Legal reading, articles of incorporation, cap tables, and then I stopped. There was a yellow sticky note attached to page 42. Page 42 contained the change of control provision. It was a standard clause that stated if the founder me was incapacitated, convicted of a felony, or declared mentally unfit, the voting rights of my shares would transfer to a designated family trust until a new CEO was appointed. I felt the blood drain from my face. "Elaine," I said, "look at this." Elaine came around the desk. She read the clause, then looked at the sticky note. On the note, in Heather's handwriting, were the words, Clause 4.2, mental incapacity, involuntary committal. This was not about the house, I whispered. Elaine's eyes widened. "If they sold the house," Elaine said, speaking fast, "the narrative would be that you were liquidating assets due to a mental breakdown. That is what Sloan was telling people. That is what Heather told the police. And if I had reacted violently," I continued, "if I had attacked them, if I had been arrested for assaulting my sister at the open house, they would have used the police report and the fire sale of the house as proof that you were unstable." Elaine finished. "They would have petitioned the court to invoke Clause 42. Heather would have taken control of your voting shares, and the merger." I said, "They could have stopped the merger, or worse, they could have forced the company to buy them out at a premium to make them go away." The email to the board, I realized, the one Dylan sent, it wasn't just to cover their tracks. It was the first step in the argument for my removal. They were building a case to declare me unfit to lead. The house sale was just the funding mechanism. I said, my voice trembling with rage, "The real target was the company. They wanted to take everything." My office door opened. Caleb walked in. He looked tired, but his eyes were alert. He was holding a flash drive. "Natalie," he said, "I found something else." "What is it?" I asked. I went back through the cloud logs for the interior cameras. Caleb said, "I went back further than this week. I checked the logs from last weekend. when you were first preparing for the Denver trip, and I asked. Heather was there. Caleb said. I looked at him. That was impossible. I had not seen Heather in 2 years. She came by while you were at the gym on Saturday morning. Caleb explained. I was in the back garden. I did not see her enter. She must have used the old spare key Mom has. Look at this footage. He plugged the drive into my laptop. A video window popped up. The timestamp was 10 in the morning, 8 days ago. The camera angle showed my home office. The room was empty. Then, the door opened. Heather walked in. She was not frantic. She was calm. She walked straight to the filing cabinet. She knew exactly which drawer to open. She pulled out the binder, the same binder that was on my desk now. She opened it to page 42. She took out her phone. She took a clear photograph of the page. Then she put the binder back, wiped the handle of the cabinet with her sleeve, and walked out. She planned this before she even met Sloan. I said, she knew about the clause. Elaine said, she was checking the wording to make sure it would work. Caleb pointed to the screen. Watch the end, he said, on the video, just before leaving the room. Heather stopped. She looked at the photo of me and my father on the desk. She picked it up. For a second, I thought she might look remorseful. Instead, she opened the back of the frame, took out the cash I kept there for emergencies, about $500, and put it in her pocket. Then she put the frame back, face down. She did not just want to win. Caleb said quietly, she wanted to erase you. I sat back in my chair. The scale of it was suffocating. My sister, my flesh and blood, had not just stumbled into a bad idea. She had orchestrated a coup. She had recruited my employee. She had hired a professional money launderer. She had weaponized my mother. And she had done it all to take the one thing I had built for myself. Elaine stood up. She picked up the binder and the flash drive. This changes the strategy, Elaine said. Her voice was no longer just professional. It was deadly. We are not filing a fraud case anymore. Natalie, what are we filing? I asked. RICO, Elaine said. Racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations. We have a conspiracy involving wire fraud, identity theft, corporate espionage, and a coordinated attempt to seize control of a multi-million-dollar asset. We have 3 or more actors working in concert. We have a pattern of illegal activity. She looked at me. If we go down this road, there is no turning back. Mandatory minimum sentences, asset forfeiture. This will destroy Heather's life completely. She will not just go to jail for a few months. She will go to federal prison for years. I looked at the picture of my father that Caleb had captured on the video, the one Heather had knocked down after stealing from me. I thought about the mental incapacity clause she tried to use to invalidate my mind. Do it, I said. But we need one more thing, Elaine said. To make the conspiracy charge stick, we need to prove the money trail. We need to link the escrow coordinator, Barry, directly to Heather or Dylan. We need to prove they were going to split the proceeds. Caleb cleared his throat. I might have a lead on that, he said. Remember the license plate? I ran it through a friend who works at the rental agency. The car wasn't rented by Barry. Who rented it? I asked. It was rented under a corporate account, Caleb said. A shell company called Vaughn Consulting. I frowned. I did not know that name. Who owns Vaughn Consulting? I asked. Caleb hesitated. I dug a little deeper. He said, the registered agent for Vaughn Consulting is a man named Elliot Vaughn. The name meant nothing to me. Who is Elliot Vaughn? I asked. Caleb looked at me, and then at the floor. He is the husband of the woman Sloan Mercer was having lunch with last week, Caleb said, and according to his LinkedIn profile, he was Heather's high school boyfriend. The circle was closed. It was incestuous, small, and petty. A high school reunion of people who hated me, all coming together to pick the meat off my bones. We have them. I said. Elaine nodded. She picked up her phone. I am calling the federal prosecutor. She said, get ready for the hearing. Natalie, we are going to bury them. I looked out the window at the city skyline. I felt no joy. I felt no relief. I only felt the cold, hard satisfaction of an equation finally balancing out. They wanted to prove I was unfit. I was about to show them exactly how capable I really was. The final confrontation did not happen in a courtroom, but in a high-stakes mediation suite in downtown San Francisco. My lawyer, Elaine, had orchestrated this to force a global settlement before we moved to a public trial that could spook my investors. The room was cold, lined with mahogany, and smelled of expensive coffee and fear. On one side of the long table sat Sloane Mercer, looking like a shadow of the polished agent she had been a week ago. Her lawyer, a tired-looking man from a malpractice insurance firm, sat beside her. Next to them was Dylan Rourke, his arrogance replaced by a nervous twitch in his leg. And at the end, isolated, sat Heather. She wore a gray cardigan and refused to look at me. I sat opposite them. Caleb was to my right, looking uncomfortable in a suit but radiating quiet satisfaction. Elaine stood at the head of the table, commanding the room like a general. "We are not here to debate the facts," Elaine began, placing a heavy stack of files on the table. "We are here to determine the severity of the sentencing recommendation we submit to the district attorney." Elaine projected the first image onto the wall monitor. It was the audit log from Bright Hollow Labs. "Exhibit A," Elaine said, "the digital theft. We have indisputable proof that Mr. Rourke accessed secure servers to steal Ms. Patterson's identity." She clicked the remote. The video of Heather in my home office appeared. The timestamp confirming her premeditation. "Exhibit B," Elaine continued, "the physical theft and reconnaissance." Then, she played the audio Caleb had recorded. Heather's voice filled the room, cold and threatening, promising to evict Caleb and claiming I had signed everything. Sloane's lawyer cleared his throat. My client was misled. He argued weakly. She believed the documents were genuine. Elaine turned to him, her expression predatory. "That brings us to the first major revelation," Elaine said. "We tracked the so-called transaction coordinator, Barry, the man fleeing the scene in the rental car." She clicked the remote again. A mugshot appeared. It was Barry, but his name was actually Jerome. "Jerome is not an escrow officer," Elaine stated. "He is an operative for a processing outfit based in Nevada that was investigated 2 years ago for wire fraud. They specialize in flash transactions, creating temporary escrow accounts to intercept deposit wires before disappearing. Sloane Mercer did not just hire a coordinator, she engaged a known money laundering service." Sloane gasped. "I did not know," she cried out. Heather introduced him to me. She said he was a family friend who handled their estate planning. Elaine ignored her and turned to Heather. "And that brings us to the motive," Elaine said. She held up the binder Heather had tried to steal. "We assumed this was about $4 million. Elaine said, "We assumed Heather just wanted the cash from the house sale, but the forensic accounting tells a different story." Elaine looked directly at Heather. "You did not just want the cash, did you, Heather? You wanted to trigger the incapacity clause." The room went silent. Elaine explained the scheme to the stunned lawyers. Heather intended to create a chaotic, fraudulent sale. She knew that when the news broke, the board of directors would panic. She planned to use the forged documents and the staged mental breakdown narrative to petition the court for emergency conservatorship over my voting shares. She was not trying to sell a house. I said, speaking for the first time, she was trying to stage a corporate coup. She wanted to force me to sign a real settlement to avoid a scandal, or have me declared unfit so she could sell my company out from under me. Elaine clicked the remote one last time. A text thread appeared. It was between Heather and Dylan. "When she is out, you get 1% of the buyout." The text from Heather read, "Just make sure the signature looks perfect." Dylan put his head in his hands. The 1% he had been promised was now the evidence that would send him to prison. The mediator looked at the defense table. "I have seen enough." The mediator said, "This is not a dispute. This is a criminal conspiracy." Heather suddenly stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She looked at me, her eyes red and swollen. "Why do you have to be so cruel?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You have everything, Natalie. You have the money, the career, the respect. I have nothing. I was just trying to level the playing field. I was taking back what should have belonged to the family if Dad had not left everything to you." I stood up slowly. I did not yell. I did not cry. Dad left me the company because I built it with him, I said quietly. He left you the trust fund, which you spent in 3 years. You are not a victim. Heather, I am your sister, she sobbed. I did this for us. No. I said, my voice hardening. You stole my identity. You terrorized my employee. You tried to destroy my life's work. You took what was mine, and you called it family. That is not love. That is just greed. The legal hammer came down hard. The settlement was brutal. Sloan Mercer surrendered her real estate license permanently to avoid immediate prosecution for aiding and abetting fraud. She would never sell a home again. Dylan Rourke was fired for cause, and we handed his file to the FBI for corporate espionage. He would likely face federal charges. Heather took the hardest hit, to avoid a 10-year sentence for RICO violations. She accepted a plea deal. She would serve 18 months in a minimum security facility for fraud and forgery, but the financial penalty was the true justice. The court ordered restitution set exactly at $4,200,000, the price of the house she tried to sell. Since she did not have the money, a lien was placed on her future inheritance and any assets she owned. She left the mediation room in handcuffs. 2 days later, I walked into the boardroom at Bright Hollow Labs. The mood was different. The whispers had stopped. The board had seen the evidence. They knew I was not unstable. I was unbreakable. We closed the merger deal that afternoon. The valuation was higher than we expected, partially because the investors were impressed by how swiftly I had handled the internal threat. I implemented a new protocol immediately. No digital signatures were valid without biometric two-factor authentication. The Dylan Rourke vulnerability was closed forever. I called Caleb into my office. He stood by the door, still looking like he expected to be fired. Caleb, I said, I am making some changes. I understand. He said, I can be out by the end of the week. I smiled. I am promoting you. I said, I need a director of facilities for the new headquarters. The salary is triple what you are making now, and I am giving you a bonus equal to the commission Sloan would have made on the house. You saved my home. Caleb, you are the only family I have left. Caleb stared at me, tears welling in his eyes. He nodded, unable to speak. That evening, I drove back to 1842 Seabright Lane. I parked in the driveway. The for sale sign was gone. The lockbox was gone. I walked inside. The staging furniture had been hauled away. My old, comfortable couch was back. My books were back on the shelves. The photo of my father was back on the desk. I stood in the center of the living room and looked out at the Pacific Ocean. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of gold and violet. The house was quiet. It was no longer a product. It was no longer a crime scene. It was mine. I had lost a sister, but I had regained my life. I realized then that boundaries are not just lines we draw for others. They are the walls that keep our sanctuary safe. Anyone who tried to cross mine again would find that the motivated seller was gone. The owner was home, and she was never leaving. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on the ending. If you enjoyed this revenge story, please make sure to subscribe to the Boss Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people. Your support means the world to us.